Welcome to my top 10 most underrated college football teams. At number 10, I have, pretty obviously with the background, I have Washington State. Washington State is an extraordinarily underrated team right now. I have them really low on the list just because I was thinking about them first rather than any other team. So I kind of just immediately put them on here. I should have had them higher, but let me explain why. First off, they upset Wisconsin early on in the season at Wisconsin. That looked like a pretty good game at the time, but then Wisconsin started looking worse, but then they started looking better and whatnot. Then, as time went on, they went to play against Oregon at home, and they led entirely. They led the whole game until the fourth quarter. They allowed 29 points, including a pick six, to give Oregon a massive comeback win, which doesn't look too good for Washington State. But to look at it now, that final score looks really good for Washington State, even though they blew it. Then they beat Cal pretty bad. Then they lost 30-14 to USC at USC. And that looks like a pretty bad score. But if we look with our eyes, Washington State had USC like right there, down to the wire. At the end of halftime, the score was 14-17. They just got shut down and did nothing in the second half. They did nothing offensively in the second half. They had the game like right there, and they just lost control of the USC offense. They lost to Oregon State 24-10. Oregon State now enters the top 25. This was also at Oregon State. It just looks to me like this was a terrible offense game for Washington State. It looks like it was. And yeah. And then they lose 21-17 against Utah at home, which the game ended because of a holding penalty, and Utah also got a very good and easy touchdown off of a punt, like hitting a player and giving them the ball. So all I'm trying to say with these game stats is that Washington State has played teams close and steady, and they're not getting the recognition they deserve. They have a pretty easy schedule ahead of them. They can handle every team they go against. They have Stanford on the road, ASU at home, U of A on the road, and Washington at home. That's pretty easy games for them to handle. Of course, throwing my team under the bus and a team that I have on the list under the bus, the difference is, road and home. I actually would say that the game at Stanford is going to be a more difficult one for them because reasons. Next, our next team is number 9 is Notre Dame. Yes. Notre Dame they are bouncing back. They have taken some really shitty losses this year, if we're being real. They've taken some pretty bad losses that look pretty bad. Like they lost to Marshall. They also, one of their 3 losses right now comes from Ohio State, and it was 21-10 was the final score at Ohio State. So that looks like a pretty good game. They lost at home to Marshall. What the hell? They barely beat Cal at home. What the hell? But then they beat North Carolina on the road. That game is starting to look a lot better for them now because North Carolina that's their only loss. Then they beat BYU at home, and then they lost to Stanford at home. Then they beat the shit out of UNLV, and then they beat the shit out of Syracuse. To me, it looks like Notre Dame is really starting to bounce back and get into their flojo, dropping 2 games, 40-plus points in their past 2 games. Both of them. 40-plus points or more Or 40. Oh, I don't even know what I'm saying. It's so late. I'm so tired. Dropping 40 plus points in their last 2 games. One of them being against the number 16. One loss, Syracuse. And now they are going to play at home against Clemson. And I have a feeling Notre Dame might be able to pull off a nice little upset, taking down Clemson and showing what they're really worth. And maybe even later on they play at USC. We can see what they will do there. But that is then. Right now is Clemson at Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame is getting no respect right now. And they're just going to, like, they're getting no respect right now. After that loss to Stanford, they're getting no respect. And that is what these teams thrive off of. Number 8, I have the Tar Heels. Speaking of Notre Dame, just not too long ago, the Tar Heels' only loss is to Notre Dame. Their only loss. Other than that, they barely beat Appalachian State in a fantastic game. It may not have been the best team to have that fantastic game against, but they still won. They also, they barely beat Georgia State at Georgia State by 7 points. Then they lost at home to Notre Dame. Then they beat the shit out of Virginia Tech. Then they barely beat Miami by 3 points at Miami. They barely beat Duke at Duke by 3 points. And then they beat Pitt at home 42-24. And I think the Tar Heels here, they've had some really sketchy games and some really close games. And they're slowly climbing their way up the rankings. But they're going to play Virginia at Virginia. That looks like maybe it could be an upset game for Virginia. But they're going to play at Wake Forest. I can guarantee you. They already have the point. They already have Wake favored, and it hasn't even played out this week. I have a feeling that North Carolina is going to shock the world and beat Wake Forest, and they're going to finish out the schedule. I'm not going to say that they're going to maybe upset Clemson in the ACC championship, but I definitely think that this team will be a scary team as time goes on, and they're not getting respect. They're not getting any respect, even though they are climbing and they are the number 17 team in the country. Number 7 is Iowa State. This team I'm strong about. Like, this team they are underrated. They are underrated. If I could find Iowa State's schedule, they have played really good. Like, they beat their rival Iowa by 3 points. Both very defensive teams playing each other in a non-offensive match. Then they lost by 7 points at home to Baylor in a very close matchup. Then they lost by 3 points, 11-14 at Kansas. And then they lost by 1 point at home to Kansas State. And then they lost by 3 points at Texas, 24-21. Like, they play these teams so close and so down to the wire. The only exception is Oklahoma at Iowa State. Oklahoma won 27-13. That's another team I should have put on this list that I think is really underrated right now, is Oklahoma. But I didn't put them on this list. But I think Iowa State has a lot more potential. Kansas State, playing Kansas State to a 1-point game, that's pretty crazy. That is impressive, to say the least. And I just think based off of their stats, based off of their final scores, they've been robbed of a lot of games. Right now, they are 0-5 in their conference. They haven't won a conference game. And one of those was a 1-point loss. 2 of them were a 3-point loss. Like, that is just... They're a really strong competitor for being one of the lowest teams in the Big 12. Actually, the lowest team in the Pac-12. And whether people talk about Iowa State or not, whether they're overrated or underrated, I think they still just don't get recognition, even though they should. Number 6, Stanford. Stanford has really shocked me this year. Stanford sucked nuts last year. They were terrible, a disappointing football team. And they've done a lot better this year. They kind of got beaten pretty bad by USC, 41-28, but still putting 28 points on USC. They got beaten at Washington, 22-40. Then they got beaten at Oregon, 27-47. And they lost a heartbreaker to Oregon State at home. They lost an absolute heartbreaker. And that game they should have won, but they lost it at the last second, handing them another loss. And then they went on the road to beat Notre Dame, which is really what makes me speak so highly of this team. And then they go home to beat ASU, which, if I'm being real, is because we didn't have our other quarterback in. We had Emory Jones in. That's really why I believe we lost that game. And yes. And then they went on the road to UCLA, got clapped. That's a hard game for them to even play good in. All I'm saying is Stanford, like the losses were all against extremely good teams. Yeah, extremely good teams. Every single team has been ranked in the top 25 at least once. USC is still in the top 25. Washington was in the top 25, and there are only 2 losses right now. Oregon is number 8 in the country. Yeah, Oregon is number 8 in the country. Oregon State's number 23 in the country. They beat Notre Dame, and they beat ASU, and they lost to UCLA, number 12 in the country. Every single opponent they have lost to has had a win-to-loss record. They've had less than 2 losses, every team they've lost to. And that's pretty okay. So they're not extremely good. They're not top 25 worthy. But let's talk about bowl games and stuff. Let's click this. They are playing these teams, maybe not the best, but they're not playing them the worst. Right? They dropped 28 points on USC. They dropped 22 points on Washington. They dropped 27 points on Oregon. And they dropped 13 points on UCLA. That was their lowest scoring of the top 25s, and that's because UCLA has a pretty good defense. And they're putting up competition. Just the thing is their defense is what lacks. Their offense is there. Their defense is what lacks. And I have a feeling that Stanford's going to start rising to the top in the coming years, most likely from what I see. Number 5, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, now I have North Carolina beating them on later in the season, but I'm putting them here just because of that terrible loss they took against Louisville. I just think that they get hate. They're going to get completely thrown down and be like, oh, whatever. Yeah, this team would still be in the top 10 if they didn't have 8 turnovers in that game. 8 turnovers is going to lose you a game. Whatever happened there, whatever happened in that game was just terrible, a terrible blunder. And they still maintained points in that game. They may have gotten their butts kicked 48-21, but 21 points with 8 turnovers is not bad. It's not bad at all. They had 8 turnovers. They had almost 7 minutes more possession time because Louisville would just get the ball and score. That's how they won. That's how Louisville literally won that game. Wake Forest should still be a highly regarded team, especially after their game at home against Clemson. Clemson's the number 4 team in the country right now. And Wake Forest took them into overtime and nearly beat them. And now they're just completely disregarded from their game at Louisville. I still think Wake Forest is a really good competitor. Now, I don't have them beating North Carolina at home, and I think that's because North Carolina is going to be a bit more underrated than Wake Forest, which the ESPN is already saying Wake Forest is favored in that game. But I still don't think we should give them shade. Still think they're a good football team that are still going to make some surprises. Number 4. Now, this one is a little weird. I have Georgia here, but it's just for this week. Georgia is going to play at home against Tennessee. They're favored, And yeah, they're favored by the ESPN. But everybody in the world is saying that Tennessee is going to win this game. In fact, they ranked Tennessee at number 1 and Georgia at number 3. That is just a big sign right there, is that Georgia's getting no respect. And watch out. I know I have Tennessee winning against Georgia. A lot of people do. I'm just like the rest of everybody. But we need to be careful. If we talk so highly of Tennessee, this Georgia team is going to use that. They are going to use that, and they are going to take down Tennessee. Mark my words. If the whole world is watching Tennessee saying, oh yeah, they'll handle it, they'll take them down, Georgia's going to do some crazy shit. That's the only reason why I have them at underrated. Also because they're at number 3. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. I can scroll up and remove stuff. Oh, I'm going crazy. But Georgia, also, they had that one close game against Missouri, and they let Kent State score some points on them. But, dude, we got to remember, they killed Oregon. Yes, Oregon had a brand new coach and a brand new quarterback, but they still killed them. They also killed South Carolina. They killed multiple teams, and we're disregarding them. We are giving them nothing for their effort, for their domination. There was a time when we said Georgia was the best team in the country, undoubtedly, and now we have Tennessee over them. And mark my words, if we keep giving them all this, if we keep giving them all of this light, all of this, or if we keep giving Tennessee all this light and Georgia all this shade, Georgia's going to do some crazy shit. Number 3, I have TCU, because TCU is ranked under Alabama right now, and the ESPN is doing everything in their power to keep Alabama above TCU. First off, I know exactly why they have Alabama there, because 1, Nick Saban, and 2, Bryce Young, maybe even their running back. But TCU is an undefeated team, pulling off many crazy games. In fact, beating Kansas State, which looks like a great win right now, and coming from behind and beating Oklahoma State in a game I thought they were going to lose. They were down the whole time, and they managed to come from behind and win the game. But they have Alabama at number 6 because their one loss was against the number 1 team in the country. There's 2 reasons Tennessee is number 1 ranked by the ESPN. 1, to make Alabama look better, and 2, for a nice fat title on that Tennessee-Georgia game. That's the only reason. That's the only reason Tennessee is number 1. If that wasn't there, Tennessee would be ranked number 2 right now. Maybe even number 3 still. Undoubtedly. That's just how the ESPN is. No, and then we also have to talk about why the hell is LSU number 10? Tennessee killed LSU. LSU also has 2 losses. They're ranked in the top 10, but guess who they play? They play Alabama. Alabama beats the number 10 team. Guess where they're going? They're going up. And TCU's not moving anywhere. That's what the ESPN's plan is. They're trying to make Alabama look better than TCU. But I think TCU's getting no respect from the ESPN right now. TCU looks like a really good football team. They do make a couple mistakes, and there's a little room for work, but other than that, this team could maybe be seen in the college football playoff. Number 2, call it bias, but ASU. Really, ASU's had such a tough season because we lost our coach, and we have Emory Jones on our team. If this Emory Jones motherfucker did not become of existence at Arizona State, ASU would be on fine footing right now. Trenton Bourguet, our second-string quarterback, who was originally going to start, and before Emory Jones came in and took his spot right out of the palm of his hands, he threw for 435 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception in the Colorado game. Now, granted, it is Colorado, but considering that the spot was open for quarterback, he delivered. He delivered and gave us a nice fat 42-34 win, which was made closer because of a freaking punt return. And he also when Emory Jones got injured in the Washington game, came in, threw for 182 yards, 15 of his 21 passes completed. I think he came in like halfway through the second quarter. He threw for 21 passes completed, 15 of them, 182 yards. Oh, it doesn't look too good. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. The interception was because his wide receiver slipped and fell, leaving the Washington player to easily jump in the air and grab it. That's the only interception he threw. ASU took down number 21 Washington State, and I feel like ASU right now is getting all the shade because of just what's happened in the program. I think they are just, like Harris Highlights, for instance, talks down on ASU a lot, saying he thinks they're one of the worst teams in all of Power 5. And I'm just like, whoa, dude, hold up. There's a lot worse teams than them. But that's just Harris Highlights' opinion. I feel like everybody has looked at the Sun Devils as just a garbage school right now, which their record says yes. Some of the games they've played says yes. But what I see in the future, no. ASU is disrespected right now. And honestly, ASU could be a really good football team next year. If we keep Sean Aguano, if they decide to hire Sean Aguano and we have a good recruiting class in the next year, keep TB, get some, defense or something, ASU could be a very good team next year. We're right there. In fact, in 2021, they were saying we could be a national championship team. They said it. We had Jaden Daniels. We had a lot of people. I think personally the issue was Herm Edwards. After he left, it seems the program has changed for the better from what I've seen. But enough about ASU. Number 1, Kansas State might be like, what? They're literally number, 12? Well, yes, but I think they should be higher. Like, first off, they're number 13. First off, Kansas State is ranked behind Ole Miss and LSU because both of those teams are fucking SEC teams. Why not? LSU's being placed at number 10 because they're going to play Alabama, make Alabama look better. Ole Miss is placed in the top 11 for no fucking reason at all. They got killed by LSU. That's the only reason LSU is up there is because they're playing Alabama and because they kind of beat the crap out of Ole Miss. But Ole Miss is only one spot below them, and we're just disregarding the fact that Kansas State beat Oklahoma State 48-0 when Oklahoma State was like number 9 in the country with 1 loss. Potential national championship fighting team. And they only go up to number 13. No, I think that LSU and Kansas State should swap positions. And let's be real. I mean, USC has a good offense, but we just saw them have an 8-point difference against U of A. U of A has no defense. Offense, yes. So it was expected that U of A would score high points, but it was expected that USC would score higher. Well, obviously they did, but we thought they would score a lot more, not just an 8-point difference. We thought they would score a lot more. USC, to me, seems like they're playing this whole game where we're going to outscore everybody and hope that our defense can maybe make a play or two, which in the top 25 game ain't going to work. You play against Oregon, you play against TCU, you play against Alabama, play against Michigan, you ain't winning that. So I think Kansas State right now, even though they're 2 losses, should be up higher. I think they should be at number 9. Number 9, then USC number 10, UCLA number 11, Ole Miss, or LSU number 12, Ole Miss number 13. LSU in the top 10 feels like an over-exaggeration, especially with teams like Penn State and Utah just being disregarded. And, I think that I think number 12 would be a good spot for LSU considering their domination over Ole Miss. And I don't really think it's fair for Ole Miss to take 1 loss and just drop down too much. But I also don't think that Ole Miss should be right outside of the top 10 after being beaten so bad. And LSU should be in the top 10 for beating so bad. Oklahoma State got killed like Obviously, they got killed more than LSU got killed by Tennessee, but LSU hardly dropped. LSU went out of the top 25 and then like right back in. Oklahoma State went from number 9 to number 22, and who knows how high up they're going to get from that point on. I'd say max top 15 because they're a Big 12 school, not an SEC school. And that's the problem with Kansas State is that they're a Big 12 school, not an SEC school. They don't offer the big teams any like reason. Kansas State isn't a part of their schedule. It doesn't make them look any better. But anyways, little rant. I have to finish this fucking video up, dude. It's 11. I'm so tired. So that's all. Adios.